The announcement hit like thunder. It wasn't whispered in back rooms. It wasn't buried in press releases. It was shouted, loud, clear, for the world to hear. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso, had stepped to the podium, fire in his eyes, his fists clenched tight against the wooden stand. And with one single sentence, he cracked the system wide open. From this day forward, no African will need a visa to step foot in Burkina Faso. Not one. Not ever again. The crowd erupted. Some cheered like a dam had burst. Others stood frozen, their mouths open in disbelief. The cameras flashed. The microphones hissed. The world leaned closer. Because this was not just about visas. It was about chains. It was about centuries of division, of borders carved not by Africans, but by the hands of colonizers long dead. And now, this young soldier in a green beret had lit the fuse. He said it. He finally said it. We are free to move. We are free to unite. For years, Africans had been strangers to one another on their own soil. Nations split by invisible lines. Visas demanded at borders that once never existed. Brothers turned into foreigners. But Traoré, he was tearing those lines apart. And his words that day weren't just policy. They were prophecy. The hall shook with applause. But outside those walls, the world trembled with fear. Because if one nation could break the system, others might follow. No more gates between us. No more papers to prove our blood. Africa is for Africans. And Burkina Faso will lead the way. It was explosive. It was dangerous. It was destiny. And it was only the beginning. The news traveled faster than fire on dry grass. Within hours, radio stations buzzed. Screens across Africa lit up. Social media feeds exploded. Some called it madness. Others called it salvation. But one thing was certain. Nobody could ignore it. Burkina Faso's leader has just opened his borders to all Africans. No visas. No restrictions. Ladies and gentlemen, this could shake the very foundation of our continent. In cafes from Dakar to Nairobi, whispers turned to debates. In government halls from Abuja to Addis Ababa, officials leaned over tables, their brows heavy with sweat. Was Traoré a visionary? Or a threat to order? I have seen leaders promise unity before. But this one, he speaks like a man ready to burn for it. The streets of Ouagadougou filled with chants. Flags waved high. Young men and women sang songs of freedom, their voices echoing against the hot sun. But while the people rejoiced, others plotted. In the grand offices of foreign embassies, phones rang endlessly. Diplomats argued in hushed tones, worried that their grip was slipping. If this spreads, if more African nations follow him, our influence here will crumble. Do you understand? Crumble. Meanwhile, African leaders themselves stood divided. Some praised Traoré, calling him bold. Others whispered that he was reckless, because open borders meant unity. But unity also meant power, and power was dangerous in the wrong hands. He is young. He is fiery, but fire destroys as much as it warms. If we follow him blindly, we may set the whole continent ablaze. Yet to the people, Traoré was no reckless child. He was a symbol. They saw a soldier who refused luxury, who stood in the mud with his men, who carried the dreams of the young on his shoulders. And when he said, "No visas for Africans," they didn't just hear policy. They heard dignity. My father died at a border checkpoint. He wanted to visit his brother. Paperwork delayed him until sickness took him. Now Traoré says no more. Then yes, he is my leader. The conflict deepened. One side saw freedom. The other saw collapse. Could Africa truly stand without the fences that had divided her? Or would the world conspire to break the young soldier who dared to dream it? The answer was not clear, but the stakes were. Because Traoré had done more than break the visa system. He had declared war on the old order. And the old order does not fall quietly. The sun had barely risen when the storm hit. Not rain, not thunder, but pressure. Letters from international bodies. Warnings from powerful capitals. Threats disguised as diplomacy. They told Traoré to back down, to rescind his declaration, to maintain stability. But everyone knew what those words meant. They meant, obey or pay. Captain, the calls are endless. They are threatening sanctions. They are threatening isolation. If you continue, the weight of the world will fall on us. Traoré leaned back in his chair, his face calm, but his jaw tight. He was young, yes, but in his silence, there was steel. Then let it fall. If the cost of freedom is pressure, we will carry it. Better to suffer for our dignity than to live forever on our knees. His words carried through his cabinet like fire. Some nodded fiercely, others trembled in fear. Because the truth was clear. A declaration like his could not exist without consequences. And the consequences were coming fast. Sanctions are being prepared. Investments are being reconsidered. Burkina Faso is being painted as unstable, its leader branded as a radical. But while the outside world pushed back, inside the continent, something else was happening. From Mali to Niger, from Ghana to Chad, crowds spilled into the streets. Young voices roared in unison. No visas. One Africa. Traoré is right. The chant thundered across borders. Borders that suddenly felt thinner. For the first time, I believe we can be one people again. If Burkina Faso can do it, why not Nigeria? Why not all of us? The movement was no longer confined to Ouagadougou. It was spreading, viral, unstoppable. And with every chant, the pressure on Traoré grew heavier. Because now he wasn't just carrying Burkina Faso, he was carrying the hope of millions. He is playing with fire. He risks all of us for his dream of unity. If he does not fall, our nation will. Whispers of coups, rumors of plots, dark figures meeting in shadowed rooms, discussing how to silence the man in the green beret. The climax was no longer a choice. It was a collision. One man, one nation, against the system. And as the crowds chanted outside his gates, as the threats piled high, as the world waited to see if he would bend, Traoré stood before his people once again, and his voice roared above the storm. They tell us to stop. They tell us to bow. But I say this to every African listening. I will not retreat. I will not surrender. Burkina Faso will remain open, and may the rest of Africa follow. The crowd exploded. Drums thundered. Flags shook the air. It was no longer just a policy. It was revolution. And in that moment, the young soldier was no longer just a leader. He was a symbol, a flame. But every flame draws shadows, and the shadows were closing in. Night fell over Ouagadougou, but the streets did not sleep. Torches burned. Songs rose into the sky. The people had chosen their side. And yet, beyond the cheering crowds, a deeper silence lingered. The kind of silence that comes before history decides its verdict. Do you know what this moment means? It means my grandchildren may walk across Africa, without papers, without fear. It means our chains, forged in another century, are finally breaking. For the ordinary African, Traoré's words had done more than change borders. They had cracked open a dream long buried. A dream of unity. A dream that Africa could be whole again. My son will grow up knowing he belongs not just to Burkina Faso, but to Africa itself. But outside Africa, the reaction was far colder. Sanctions were announced. Airlines reconsidered their routes. Foreign leaders declared the move irresponsible. And yet, none of it broke the spirit of the people. Instead, every blow only deepened their resolve. They can sanction us. They can starve us. But they cannot erase what we've seen now. We've seen freedom. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. The system had been challenged. And though Traoré's fate remained uncertain, his defiance had already altered the map in people's minds. Lines drawn by outsiders no longer seemed sacred. For the first time, Africans began to imagine borders fading, walls falling, a continent breathing as one. Let them say what they want. Let them call me reckless. History will decide. But remember this, my people. Africa was never meant to be divided. Not by papers. Not by visas. We are one. And no decree, no empire, no system will change that truth. His words echoed not just in Ouagadougou, but across deserts and rivers, mountains and cities, into the hearts of millions. And as the night sky stretched above, one could almost feel the earth shift beneath their feet. A young soldier had stood against the weight of the world. He had dared to break the system. And whether he triumphed or fell, the idea was now alive. An idea that no wall could contain. An idea that no threat could silence. An idea called Africa.